Hi guys, welcome back to Cancer Free Cree. I'm so excited to have you back today, and today we're talking about one of my favorite things, and that is saving money. I am such a bargain shopper and a bargain person. Say hi to Lil. And I will do anything to save a buck. So one of my favorite things to do is make homemade croutons. So here's a bag. These are two things that I kind of keep in my freezer and accumulate over time. And one of them is the ends of our bread. So obviously some people really enjoy eating the ends of bread. I really enjoy it too, but what I love better than eating crusty ends of bread as toast is making crusty, crispy, yummy croutons. So this is just, we go through a lot of bread in my house because between all of us, all four of us. So this is probably a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks worth of loaves of bread ends. And I'm gonna cut these up and we'll make them into yummy croutons. And I'd say the person in my house that loves these the most is my son, who is 20 months. So really good for everyone in the family. So we'll whip those up, and then we'll also do my scratch veggie broth. So I save all of my scraps from all the food that I make. So we have like onion scraps, we even have Swiss chard, garlic, we have cilantro, parsley, celery, carrot, peelings, a little bit of everything. So I just keep this bag in my freezer. You can also do it in your fridge if you make it every week. Sometimes I don't always get around to it, so I keep it in the freezer and it lasts a little bit longer. Also mushroom stems too, if you're not utilizing those. And this is virtually free veggie stock, and it's really yummy, and you know what's going into it, which is really nice. So we'll get started on the stock first. I did set my oven to 400 to preheat for the croutons, but we'll start with the stock and get that simmering on the stove. So I have a big stock pan here with a lid on it because we're gonna let it simmer for a while. And if we leave the lid off, then the steam and the water will evaporate and it will give us less stock over time. So we want to keep the lid on so we keep as much liquid as possible. So first things first, and I'm going to turn on the heat and get a little olive oil heating in the pan, and we're actually going to, what I like to do is saute a few onion pieces and some garlic and celery and get that kind of going, and it gives it a little bit more complex flavor. And keep in mind, if you're using things such as like purple cabbage or purple carrots, it's going to turn your stock purple, which is totally fine. It doesn't affect, this is my stove. I have to deal with this every day. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. All right, we're gonna need another burner. So yeah, so it won't affect the flavor, it just affects the color. So just depending on what you're making, if you're making, you know, something like white rice or something with veggie stock and you have purple stock, it's going to turn your rice purple. So keep that in mind. All right, so first things first, I'm going to go ahead and put some olive oil in the pan. So I'm just going to kind of coat the bottom of the pan with olive oil. And I'm heating just over medium so we can saute again a little bit of garlic and celery and some of the onion pieces. So first I'm going to take just a garlic clove. I have a lot of garlic skins in the bag, but I want to do actual whole garlic because it gives a little bit more flavor. So I'm going to take my knife, and with the flat end, I'm going to give it a little whack, and that will help us peel the skins off. So super easy trick. And then, oh, you can hear the oil going. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and mince up this garlic. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be perfect, because we're just using it more as flavor than anything. So however you want to do it is totally fine. So I'm just giving it kind of a rough chopping. So I'm going to toss that guy in there. And then I'm also going to use some celery, some extra celery that I just grabbed out of the fridge, and you can totally use the ends. Again, we are going to essentially toss out the cooked veggies. So it's totally fine if they're ugly or misshapen or kind of floppy. So I'm just going to chop this up. Get that going. And we just want to cook it until it gets kind of just a little fragrant. And so out of my bag, I'm going to grab some onion peels. So I have, you know, some leftover bits of onion. I'm going to toss that in there. You can honestly toss the whole bag, but it's a little bit easier to brown instead of steam if you just do little pieces. Oh, I'll do a little carrot in there. Green onion tops and bottoms are also an awesome addition to any stock that you do. And you can do this with chicken, you can do it with beef if you have leftover bones, and it's essentially the same process, and you can totally keep those in your freezer too. All right, so we've got our water in, and again, I put about 3/4. If you have less veg or want a more condensed or concentrated stock, you can do less water. But we are gonna go ahead and bring the water to a boil, and we're going to put in our bay leaf. So stick in the bay leaf, and we're not gonna salt it or anything until the very end. I do like to add a little bit of salt, but you don't have to. And I'm gonna wait until it's all done and before we strain it off to season it, and we'll taste it then. So we're just gonna, again, bring that to a boil. When it's boiling, we're gonna turn it down to a simmer, and then we're gonna put our lid on, and we're gonna let it set for at least 30 minutes and up to, you know, 2 hours. And while that's working its thing, we're going to make our croutons. So we're just gonna take the ends of the bread, and we're going to chop them up, and you can make them as big or small as you want to. I like mine in kind of smaller bite-sized pieces, especially since the baby likes to eat them. So I just want to make slices lengthwise and then kind of widthwise, and so this is kind of the size that I like to make mine in. And again, you can make really big croutons. They do look really beautiful on soups if you make kind of larger big croutons, but whatever you're into. So when we have them all cut up, we're going to take a large bowl and put all of our croutons in the bowl and keep chopping. So we've got our bread all chopped into little pieces, and look how much that makes. So again, free croutons. I hope you love it as much as I do. So you can use any bread to do this. You could even use, you know, glutinous bread, gluten-free, vegan, whatever it is. It doesn't make a difference. It all works the same. So get your bread, and we're gonna oil it up and get it seasoned and get it in the oven. So we're gonna do several drizzles of olive oil right on our bread, and we wanna coat it really, really nicely because that's what helps give it that crunchy crispiness, so don't be afraid. And the bread is going to soak up the oil, so don't skimp on this part. Add a little bit more. Smells so good. All right, so that looks good. The pieces, you can see, let me find a good one here. They're looking nice and oily and golden. So next we're gonna do the seasoning. So I like to do garlic powder and nutritional yeast and salt. And so garlic powder or garlic granules, I probably do about 1/2 teaspoon. It's pretty potent stuff, so you don't want to do too much. But what's great is that you can taste it and see if you want more. So a little sprinkle of that, and then this is our nutritional yeast. You can find this in many different brands. This is the one I really like, and this is awesome. It is great if you're plant-based or vegan or dairy-free because it has a nice cheesy flavor. It's very strong. The flavor is very strong, and honestly at first I was not a big fan, but as my taste buds changed I got really into it. So it's best to start with a little bit and then work up to more in a recipe. So if you're not really crazy about the flavor, then start small. But it has that nice savory umami flavor, and again it's kind of cheesy, and it's really high in B vitamins as well. So it's awesome. Try it. I use it in a ton of stuff. So for this I'm going to do probably about 1 teaspoon. I'm just doing it straight in my hand there. And again, I can add more later if I want. And this gives it kind of like a garlic parmesan flavor. And then we're gonna do our salt. So I'm gonna start with about a half teaspoon of salt. Mix it all together. And then taste. So good. I'm gonna add a little bit more nutritional yeast because I want mine extra cheesy. Try it again. Delicious. So now I have my sheet pan all ready to go, and I'm just gonna dump it right onto the sheet pan. And then we're going to spread them out. You want them nice and even so that they brown and crisp up really well. I can smell that cheesiness. So good. All right, and then we're gonna pop them in our 400-degree oven. And we're gonna set a timer for about 9 minutes and check on them and zhuzh them around. And if they're crispy, we can take them out. And if not, we'll leave them in for another minute or two. It is super important not to leave these alone, and make sure you set a timer because they go from being crispy and delicious to burnt really, really fast. So let's wait. Okay, so our croutons are done. I ended up putting them in for about 15 minutes, so a little bit longer than I had anticipated. And they are crispy and brown, crunchy, so good. I dare you to not eat the entire pan before you get them in a container and put away. So good. So I'm just gonna store them in a couple of glass jars and with an airtight seal, and they'll last weeks if you don't eat them all, of course. And these make even like a really nice Christmas gift. You can put them in cute little jars and put a little ribbon and give them to your gluten-free friends or just people that love croutons. They're really yummy and they're really easy, so I highly recommend you make them, and they're free. Just buy bread, save the ends, voila. It's so delicious. Enjoy. So we're gonna do a little bit of salt. I'm gonna start with about a half teaspoon. I don't want it to be salty. I just want it to be have a little touch of savoriness, so it's not quite so bland. And that's just more for when I use it in soups and whatnot. Another half teaspoon, and the best thing to do is to gradually add the salt. You don't want to add too much at once because then it might get too salty. And you don't want a broth that's too salty, because when you use it in things like really anything, soups or stews, and you're adding other salty components or more salt to season it, then it might end up too salty and ruining your dish. So you just want it just ever so slightly salty. So I'm gonna try it again. Perfect. So good. And you can take this, once it's seasoned, you can just sip on it. It's super nourishing and calming for your gut and your belly. And, you know, when days that you're, you know, maybe especially after the holidays, if you feel like you've been eating too much and you're just feeling bloated and yucky, this is something really nourishing and good that kind of helps cleanse out your body and gives your digestive tract a little bit of time to just relax. Because, you know, it's just liquid, so you don't have to digest it. So I highly recommend doing this. Honestly, you could totally use store-bought broth and just sip on that too, but just read your ingredients and make sure that it has good stuff in it. You want to avoid things like yeast extract and artificial flavors and even natural flavors. So you want it to be as pure as possible, and that's why I make mine at home. Plus it's free. So once it's all seasoned and ready to go, we'll take our pot, and usually I do this over the sink, but I want you guys to be able to see it. So I take a big measuring cup. This is a 1 quart measuring cup, and then I take my fine mesh strainer and I set it up so that it is nice and steady. So again, I'm doing this in a bowl to catch any of the additional liquid, but you can totally do it over the sink. And very carefully, I'm just going to strain it off. And then I'm going to catch all of the yummy cooked veggies that are all done. And this you can just discard or compost. And then what you get is your amazing broth. Look at that. Even better. I store this 2 ways. So I store it in the refrigerator in glass jars to use right away. So voila, there's my broth. I got my lid. I'm actually gonna let it cool off before I seal it, but I'm just gonna put a lid on it. Once it's cool, then I'm gonna pop it in the fridge, and then it's there for me to use whenever I'd like. And it lasts up to 2 weeks. It really depends. You just want to smell it before you try it. It will start to turn a little bit like fermenty or vinegary if it sits in there for too long. So just make sure you smell it or taste it if it's been in there for more than a week. And so with the second half of my broth, I will freeze it. So I'll just use like a plastic deli just because you can totally freeze in glass, but I have broken so many jars freezing in glass and I just can't do it anymore. So I freeze in plastic. So I will again just pour this guy in, my deli, and then again I'll let it cool off, and then make sure you leave a little bit of room in the top. You don't want to fill it too full because when things freeze, they expand and the lid will pop right off in the freezer if you don't leave enough room. So I'm going to leave these on the counter for probably about 45 minutes to an hour to let them just totally cool off, and then I'll pop them in the fridge, and then there you are. Totally free, delicious broth. So again, we've got our broth that we made today. We've got our croutons that we made today. And these are just leftovers, you guys. Leftovers. Totally free. Virtually free. Anyways, I hope that you make a couple of these or add them into your weekly or monthly staples, and it's totally worth it. I promise. It's so much fun, and I hope you enjoyed this episode today and get your butt in the kitchen and start cooking. Love you so much. See you soon. Bye.